Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode 180 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, CEO and co-founder here at Thoughtium, and I am with a friend, a colleague, an organizer of community, a storyteller, a speaker. What don't you do, Xavier?
No, keep going, bro. Keep going. Keep going. I want to know what you really think.
Yes. I'm here with none other than my good friend, Xavier. Xavier Ramey is the CEO of Justice Informed. They are a leading social justice firm based here in Chicago. Xavier has had a lot of experience building and scaling his organization and helping other organizations build and scale themselves. And today we're going to be talking about next generation leadership. What are those leadership qualities that we all have our eye on as we kind of stand at the doorstep of our firms, look out and say, with the world coming at us as quickly as possible, how do we need to continue to develop our people and our leaders and shape our organizations in a way that's conducive to producing the best leaders? So, Xavier, thank you so much for joining. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm feeling how I look. How am I doing?
Good. You looking
there you
good.
go. There you go. That's a Leo intro.
Yes, you're looking good. I want to start by, this is the first time that you've been at the Navigating Now table. So we have this incredible community that loves to really get to know you as a person first.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put a little bit of a leadership twist on it. So tell me, what is the first memory you have of being a leader?
So I would have to go back to my early 20s. I had started a job at the Young Men's Educational Network in a neighborhood I grew up in called North Lawndale. I took on a job that, in retrospect, I don't think I was the best for. And it was a leadership role. So I had a leadership title. But if I'm looking back and being honest, I didn't have the leadership skills. I had a lot of individual talent that the executive director saw in me, and he said, we can shape you into this. The challenge I had was that the definition of leadership that he had was not one that I shared. His definition of leadership was one of what's known as servant leadership.
Yep.
And I was very much trained, like I got a business degree and all this. I was very much expecting, like, I'm going to call the shots. I'm the director. I'm this. You do what I say.
Yep.
And he was very much like, no, you lead by example. No, if we're working outside, you're the first one to pick up a shovel. If somebody needs to be there early, you're the one that's got to be there early. If there's an issue with compensation, you're the one that needs to take the pay cut first. You lead by serving others, and anything that would affect your team, you have to be the first one to swallow that pill. And there were so many experiences over the 4 or 5 years I worked with him where that eventually became my leadership style. And I love that leadership style. I also think in this day and time, it is a really, really hard leadership style to have, because I don't think a lot of people, I think they want vulnerability, transparency, these sorts of things out of the leaders that are on their teams. But I don't know if they understand what effective followership is, because that's its own practice as well, that there's no MBA program for.
Yep.
But my leadership moment was my team got jumped. I mean, that's not usually a workplace experience, but some of our managers and such, we were taking some of our young people to a basketball game, and they won the game by a buzzer beater shot at the local gym against this other group. And it was like the North Lawndale Classic, like the youth classic.
Yeah.
And those kids were salty, man. And we come outside and there's about 40, 50 of their friends just waiting for us as we're getting out. And I'm like, man, y'all, like, we're walking to the bus. We're getting on the bus. We are going home. Yeah. Call it a day. And I had to step into a situation where in defending young Black men's lives, but also as an administrative leader of the organization, it was like at the same time, right? Yeah. And I'm thinking about, I can't, I don't want any of my staff to be seen hitting these kids. These kids are like literally throwing bricks at us there. They smashed a car door in on my head. Like I'm, there's bats flying. Like it was just mayhem, absolute mayhem. Yeah. We were trying to avoid it, but de-escalating that situation. But also seeing other adults who were sitting on their porches and watching that. And after it had all settled down and we had gotten the situation under control, I went over to those adults and I was like, why were you just sitting there? And these grown men were like, why? So we can end up getting beat up like you? And I'm like, but we're the adults here. We're the leaders of this space. We're the leaders of this community. Like, why wouldn't you get involved? And he was like, man, you sound stupid. But that actually made me move back to that neighborhood and say, all right, I'm all in. We need better representation of leadership. The executive director had to sell me on servant leadership. And by that point I was like, nah, man, I'm doubling down. We're serving our community. We're serving people. We're putting our bodies in the way, and we're going to model what it looks like to take a hit and call it love.
I love that. I love that story. And servant leadership is so well known. And I don't know if there's been a lot of challenging or pushback of that, but I think the points that you make in terms of follower leadership and being able to get behind a group of people in this day and age is particularly more important. So I appreciate that insight. So today, let's fast forward. You run a growing progressive firm by the name of Justice Informed.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
So Justice Informed is a social impact consulting firm. We're based in the city of Chicago. We work coast to coast, and we focus on this idea of social impact, which I think really needs to be redefined for the 21st century. We're constantly putting ourselves in a place where we are challenging the idea of how businesses are operationally conducting their day-to-day work, of how people teams are developed, how companies are assessed. And we're doing that with a lens towards centering the ideas, the values, the actions that people who hold minoritized identities in this country say should be the way that businesses and nonprofits are run. So, but we look at all of this not in the same way as thinking like, inequity and justice, these sorts of things. They happen because people just aren't nice. That's not what we know that sometimes people aren't nice, but the reality of what we know about the brain itself is that, an unconscious bias training will show you this, like everybody doesn't intend to do harm. But also people are trying to fight for what they want. They're fighting for what they want, not necessarily what the community needs. Everybody doesn't believe that they're, as Martin Luther King said, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. I know that everyone doesn't believe that. And they show up to work. And when you start talking about inclusive workplaces and belonging and DEI, they're like, I don't have any responsibility to that person in that other department. So why are you telling me I need to do something to make them feel like they belong? Like I'm not connected to, the only reason we're even here is because I'm getting paid and they're getting paid. So let's just talk about money. Right. And that's coming into the modern workforce. So Justice Informed sets itself up, one, to assess organizations for their alignment to various diversity, equity, inclusion, corporate social responsibility, environmental social governance, and philanthropic goals. And through frameworks that I've developed over the last 15 years, we then work to help to implement the change management strategies that those organizations would need long term so that they could actually become the equitable, inclusive workplaces of belonging to attract the modern day workforce that is increasingly demanding that. But we do that while not just assuming it's about changing hearts and minds. We believe that the reason why your company may be operating in the way that is exclusive, or the reason why your nonprofit board can't recruit people of color, is less about just what people think about people and more about the fact that it's written into your bylaws. It's in your operating agreement. It's as I was giving this example to you earlier, right? Like if you have a U.S. Constitution in 1776 and it takes until 1973 to get an Equal Pay Act, well, there was probably something wrong with the way you wrote the document in 1776. Right. And so we look at it and we say, instead of trying to change hearts and minds, I want to see your documents. I want to go into your books and I want to understand how you designed this place. And then we're going to create a relaunch strategy. And then if you'd like, we will be with you along the way to help to reorganize this company or reorganize this nonprofit.
Yeah, I love that. And that sounds a lot different than, your typical kind of like off the shelf DE&I programming, if you will. Like you really are.
You just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I don't believe in DEI programming.
Got it.
Right. So most people look at it and they say, oh, we got to get a DEI program. Yeah, it's not it's just, you're running a company, right?
Yep.
I'm running a company.
Yep.
Is profit a program?
No,
profit is not a program. like our revenues a program that you operate here at Thaudium?
Right.
No, revenues are not a program. DEI is not a program.
Yeah. It's great.
And in the same way, that's what my goal is long term. Justice Informed, and I will be impactful if we can get the entire market to understand that when you're talking about people, you're not talking about a program. Mm-hmm. You're not talking about an initiative. In the same way that you can't have some keynote speaker come in and have your whole team rally around hitting the revenue goals for this year and think that that's actually driving a sales strategy. It doesn't make any sense to have a Black History Month event, bring in an African-American and talk about DEI and say we did the work.
Yep. So as you work with organizations, I understand there's assessments, there's like kind of getting at the roots, there's really working with leaders. Today's topic is about leadership and leadership qualities. I'm curious, as you are helping organizations really design and shape the future of the way that they are organized and the way that they connect both internally and with their customers, what types of leadership qualities are you encouraging or challenging your clients to look for?
Well, it really, I mean, that answer, that question I can answer in a lot of different ways. But I'll start by just saying that when we're talking about, there's an organizational leadership style, right? And like what a company or a nonprofit says they define leadership to be. And that's very much, that has to be deeply connected to what they say their actual values are, right? So if your values are, for instance, I'm in the management consulting sector. Management consulting is a very, very sort of eat what you kill type of a sector. It's a very fast paced, get out there, get some money. Everybody's got to get rich. It has a feast or famine. Like the starting wages for a lot of the jobs in our sector are so it attracts a lot of sharks, right? And those sharks will even eat each other. But that's a way that this sector has organized itself around what it thinks leadership is. Right. And so when I started Justice Informed, I had already worked with enough Deloitte consultants and McKinsey consultants. Prior to Justice Informed, I was at the University of Chicago, and I was leading what was called the social innovation and philanthropy strategy there. And I was trying to understand how to create these catalytic projects to bridge the nonprofit sector and its goals for social impact with the corporate sector and its goals for social impact with the government sector and its goals, and saying, instead of working separately, we need to work as one. And can we use this university, its research, its faculty, its students, its staff to support these organizations to start to combine these things? Because all y'all have the same client called your residents or citizens or employees. They're the same person, just with a different title. I realized that the values that an organization holds will affect what it thinks leadership is. Like when I was at UFC, one of the reasons why I started Justice Informed and I left University of Chicago, we didn't agree on what leadership was. I felt that leadership should be ambitious. Leadership should always be aware of risks, but leaders are responsible for accurately assessing the difference between threats and risks, right? Threats are risks with power. So we could say in 2014, it may be a risk to say Black Lives Matter, right? Nobody wants to put it in an email and hit reply all, right? Back then it was very dangerous. And I said, no, there's a value here. Leaders are also responsible for always understanding that, yes, we have to know the cost of making a decision, but we are always responsible for remembering the value of that as well, right? And in the same way that we know that if it's on us to get more value than we pay in cost, like $1 is worth $1. It costs $1, but it's not worth $1. Right? $1 in an investor's hand could be worth $1 million. Right. But $1 in a person who just wants a Snicker bar is worth $1. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it's what you do with it. But that depends on how much risk you're willing to take on, how you identify threats, and what you think your values should be when you show up to work. And with a lot of our clients, the first thing we're not trying to do is to tell them what leadership is. We're trying to understand the experience of leadership at their organization. That's why we lean on cultural assessments and people assessments first to say, hey, what is the experience you've had? Then let's name the effect, not try to name the intent. Because when you ask a leader, what is your leadership style? They're telling you what their intentions are. Right. But the evidence of their intention is in the felt experience of their team. Right. So instead of asking a leader, how do you define leadership? Ask their team, how have you experienced their leadership? And so that's where we go. Yeah, I love that. And as you think about, you're building a business of your own. You've been doing it for how many years? Gosh, man, this is on seventh year. Yeah. It's so funny how similar, the growth trajectory for Thoughtium and JI has been. And it's been one of the things that I've just loved connecting with you on, is kind of the trials and tribulations of building and scaling a business in a 2024 world, which is so different than even in a 2020 or 2022 world. So talk to me about how you have grown your team, and what is the difference between a justice informed employee leader, if you will, today versus 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. Okay, man, how much time we got? All right. So, I mean, you went through the same journey, I'm sure, right? When you're a solopreneur, it took me to become a business owner to know that being a business owner, a business leader, an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, these are not the same thing. These are not the same thing. Like when I started Justice Informed, I had 6 weeks of cash, and you can't pay rent. You can't pay a half month's rent. So I needed to go find some contracts. Right. Right. Like I had 6 weeks of cash in my bank account. Looking back, I should have probably saved a little longer. No investment capital, no debt capital. And you have to make that decision. Bootstrap, baby. You have to make that decision. Are you going to bootstrap this? You're going to get debt capital. You're going to get investment capital. As a Black person, I already knew the odds. right? So globally, when you think about the non-traditional investment funding space, right, only 7% or 6 or 7% of all global capital goes to people that look like me. The other 93% of it goes to people that look like you. And I was looking at the odds, and I'm going to have to bootstrap this. Like, who's paying for what a black man thinks? Who's paying full rate? Because that's what management consulting is. You're selling ideas and strategies. So when I started Justice Informed, I started with not the idea to grow and scale a company. I started with the idea to create a playground for ideas. Because again, I left the University of Chicago not with a clear plan for what management consulting needed to be as it relates to social impact. I left knowing that, well, Deloitte just bought the Monitor Institute. They didn't grow a team of leaders inside who were committed and aware of social justice. What they did was they bought a research unit. And through acquisition, they expanded their footprint into this burgeoning market, right? McKinsey grew its division. It's like acquisition. It's buying out these companies and then started to grow a DEI and social impact division. But like, this isn't like what they do, but this is like what I do. And so, so I look at that and I'm like, all right, we got to change this game. Like, they need some competition. Like these folks, these big four, big five, whatever, they need some competition. That's a very lofty goal. And it's 7 years in, we're not quite their competition yet. But man, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. And it's in sharing the recipe of going from solopreneur. And then in 2020, our business demand exploded like 800%. Well, then I need to go hire some folks. I started hiring some folks very slowly. I'm like, I'm just going to hire 2 or 3. I'm not going to go meet all the demand that is here because I'm not trying to define my business and how big it gets. I'm trying to define it in how effective it gets in confronting and redefining our market. And we're not going to redefine the market the social impact marketplace that we are in by just getting big. We're going to redefine it because we have a powerful, influential voice in showing them what business could have been had they believed that taking the slow, deliberate route of saying, hey, let's spend a couple years playing with ideas and find a financial model that gives us some cash to float and meet our cash flow needs. While we're doing that, paying people a living wage. And then whatever we learn something new, let's reorganize the business. So like I was telling you, last year, I reorganized the business again. Right. It took me an entire year. We cut 46% of our financial variable costs. We ended up reducing our fixed costs somewhere around about 15%. So we started this year in a significantly more healthy place. And though I stopped hiring again, I don't think that scaling a company is the goal of a company. I don't think that growing a business financially is the point. It's not my point. It's to create a definition of business through the way Justice Informed operates that can counter the fact that most people say social impact is secondary to financial growth, right? That's my goal. And then secondly, it's to grow a team of people who are the minoritized folks who never would have gotten a job at McKinsey in 1980, would have never been considered at Deloitte when my dad was starting a management consulting firm, which he did. Like, never would have gotten the jobs there. Like, we get to design the ideas, the solutions, the strategies that impact us because they were always about us.
I didn't realize your dad started a management consulting firm.
It's called Sustainable Communities and Associates.
And what did he work on?
Same thing I do.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And how did your experience with him inform what you're building today?
Oh, in a lot of ways, man. What to do, what not to do. You know, my dad, let's go back to leadership style. My mother told me this. She said, you know, you are the very embodiment of your father if he just had more tact.
Ooh.
Like, people see me as very direct. People see me as very like hard charging. But the reality is I'm also very polite. Right? I'm invitational. I'm not going to cuss you out because I think you're wrong. Like, my dad wasn't like that. My dad was run him through the ringer every time. You know, but he was so brilliant. You know that phrase, your talent will take you into rooms your character won't allow you to stay in. I think that, you know, my father taught me the power of ambition. He taught me what it meant to really have a vision for connecting community and business. But I think he was really before his time, and the world just didn't understand him. But he also taught me, you know, through his mistakes, man, get a contract. He was the man of the handshake. He was no, but we were hungry, bro. We had no money growing up. Like, we were living below the federal poverty line my entire childhood. And a lot of that was because not just, you know, we were broke or we were poor, but like, when I look at it, I was like, okay, it was the way my father was running his business as well. I love the business he ran. I love the ambition he had. I love the community committedness. I love how he was involved in politics. I love the social impact he was able to generate, but I'm also looking at the business mechanics that he had and the business expertise that he had. And his love for community would often mean he would hire his friends who weren't the most qualified. Sometimes it meant that he would take on contracts that he shouldn't have done that deal with this person. Or, I remember a guy showed up with a deer and paid my no, seriously, man. He paid my father. He owed him money for a social impact contract, and he was a hunter, and he went and paid my father with deer. We had no money that year. Like that was my dad's biggest contract. Wow. We had no money for lawyers to sue that man. And so we ended up, I was eating, deer, venison, scrambled eggs, venison, all poivre, like all types of just deer. But that taught me, get it on paper, be excellent at contracting, be excellent at invoicing, always have a lawyer in the background, understand these things in a real way.
Yeah. That's super valuable. That's a fun fact I didn't know about you.
Yeah.
Last point on leadership. I want to ask you, what are some of the challenges that leaders are having every day, but they're not talking about it? Like what are some of the challenges that we as leaders within organizations are facing every day, or maybe big thoughts that we have come across our brain every day, but we're not speaking about them? And it could be across your line of work or any line of work.
Man. I think the New York Times headline is mental health of leaders continues to deteriorate. And, the New York Post, right, Gen Z not interested in management roles.
Right.
The reality is leadership is hard, and it's hard because people are. Their hearts are hard, right? Their timelines are not the timelines of what the work takes. Their timelines are the timelines of what they want when they want it. And the reality of, what I think a lot of leaders are not saying right now is that, to put it bluntly, people suck. Like people can really suck. They can be hard. They can be hard-hearted. They can be. They think that they're asking you to lead, but what they're actually doing is they're asking you to fulfill their desires while not stepping in and helping in any way. They're looking at it and they're saying, "What have you done for me lately?" Like I mostly only work with leaders at the executive level right now. My team works a lot with manager level folks, and when I zoom out. And I think about even last night talking with the vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion for a 10,000 person company, right? Like we were doing dinner and what she's dealing with as a Black woman in an executive role, trying to redefine what equity is at her company, she needs more grace from her team. She needs more time to do what even Martin Luther King couldn't finish. Like she needs more, and people can be relentless in demanding that you produce what it would take a generation to create. Like and now as we create more diverse spaces, now I'm seeing that it's people of color and women and queer folks and people with disabilities who are being pointed at and shouted down and told that you're not enough. This is why I said earlier, what we actually need is less MBA programs that are focusing just on leadership. And we need more liberal arts colleges and business programs focusing on effective followership. We need more people to actually define the traits of and I think people shy away from the idea of followership because they think that, I'm not up front, so I'm not better than. But that's like saying you win the championship with a team.
Yeah.
Everybody has a role. Everybody has a role. And the lack, let me just say this clearly, the lack of effective followership in American companies and nonprofits and workplaces is destroying the desire for the people who love people and the people who are imaginative and people who are curious and people who are willing to step in and do the work. It is destroying their desire to continue to engage in the work of work. And I think this is why we're starting to see more independent contractors. This is why we're starting to see more gig work, not just as a market output of there's an opportunity to drive Uber. People are sick of people. Yeah. And the people skills, the EQ, the ability to not just demand something of people who have control or influence over resources, not just demand it of them, but to see your place in joining how they reorganize it. Show me the African American right now who has a blueprint for creating an anti-racist model for a Fortune 500 company. Show me that Black woman who has the let's do it tomorrow model. We're going to have to figure that out together. Yeah. And people are vicious in how they are pointing fingers, fatiguing, challenging, thinking they're speaking truth to power when they're only showing their traumas. You're not speaking truth to power. You're projecting. right? Like they can't see that. And the way that management theory has been created over the last several years has very much been whatever they need, it's your job to satisfy. And that doesn't create space for the person to still be a human who's in that leadership role. And as we see more minoritized persons entering leadership roles, it breaks my heart to see so many of them just being pointed at and called out. And it breaks my heart. And as an advisor to hundreds of them, I get a front row seat to that. I can't tell you how many rooms in the last 7 years I've been in these offices downtown in Chicago with these senior leaders who just come into tears where they finally have a space to talk to someone who's not going to say, you're not a good leader because you can't deal with this. And that's their team members. That's their direct reports who are just saying, gimme, 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 gimme. And if you don't want to gimme, it's because you're oppressive or you're non-inclusive or you're not ready or you don't deserve. Like this is a very, very challenging time to be a leader because people don't understand that we're all leaders. They think that only some people are leaders. And if you are a leader, they're assuming that you're a resource leader and not understanding the responsibilities of what it means to be a people leader.
Whew.
Just
so much value there. So much value there. And I just so appreciate your style. You talked about the saying that, your experience gets you in rooms that your character can't handle. And one of the things that I've just experienced about and with you, Xavier, is that like the experience that you have, the tenacity that you have, even the rhetoric and your ability to speak life into these topics also matches your character. And you can just feel that in the room with you when I'm around you. And that's something that I so respect about you. And I can imagine it's what allows so many people to love working with you. So I want to thank you for that.
I don't know. So I think let's go back to team. Man. I've had I had to learn this on leadership, man. One of my team members said, Xavier, working with you is like working next to the sun. It's so intense. It's so intense. And I think it's because outwardly, I think, I come across as humorous, lighthearted, very chill, very serious about my work, very serious about the rigor of the theories and the practices that I'm promoting. But the reality is we're going to have some fun. We're going to kick it. But what it took to get to this level of intelligence, this level of to get to the point where you are, leading a social innovation and philanthropy strategy at the University of Chicago, one of the top 5 universities in the Midwest, like what it took to get there was an incredible amount of intensity and focus and discipline over time. And this is the challenge. Like you got to do the work. You got to do the work. And what it took to get to Justice Informed, I am very, very clear that this work must continue. And one of the challenges that I know my team has, and we've gotten to such a good place now, like in our culture and our communication, like my team is in a beautiful space, but it was hard getting there because I know that they didn't expect the intensity with which I do my work and the expectation that I have on the people who are closest to me. Who are now, like, that's what I didn't realize about growing a team. They're now representing the Xavier Ramey when Xavier Ramey's not in the room. And if the client is experiencing something different, then that now breaks the company brand because it's not like we're some big company where everybody expects everybody's can do every job. Like they always say, leaders got to let go. You got to delegate. And it's like, well, if I'm going to delegate, you got to be trustworthy. That's the other side of followership and leadership. Right. And the fits and starts that we had around that early on when I had a staff person who said that, it was a real moment for me to think about my leadership style and how that character needed to always come first, not just the production,
the rays of sun.
Not just the do the work, like the character of care had to be there. And that was a team member who was saying, I don't feel that, Xavier. That was a big, big moment for me to check in with my leadership style and say, hey, I know you're an entrepreneur. I know you're Black. I know it's hard to do this, but you still have a responsibility here to these folks. And this was a young person on my team, and I could tell that it was the relationship that he was just like, man, like, this was cool when I was when I saw you as a mentor, but as an employee, man, you are tough. And I had to check myself on that.
I love that. How does your faith shape who you are as a leader?
In every way. in every way. I mean, our consulting practice, if you go on our website, you go on our LinkedIn, you're going to hear about the invitation-based approach. That is literally Christ's Gospels, the 4 chapters of the Gospel, in action. That is understanding, how we invite those we disagree with into building a better community. That came from the idea of how could Christ work with Matthew, a tax collector. Like, what does it look like for a person who co-founded one of the partner organizations of the Black Lives Matter movement? Like, I'm a co-founder of the Let Us Breathe Collective. We spent years protesting against police brutality, and imagine if my partner was like the head of wealth management at JP Chase. That's what it meant for Jesus to have Matthew as a disciple. Right. Like, when I think about that, it forces a requirement for us to always consider what it means for me as a Christian, right? Like, we are supposed to live in such a way that our very existence invites a question, because our expression of our lives is so peculiar. It's so peculiar. Like, why do you do it like that? Hey, that's not what I've seen other people do. Like, why did you say that? Why did you invite that person in? Why didn't you're a police abolitionist, Xavier. Why did you take that time to talk to that cop? Like, why would you do, like, that's what I believe is how we should be living every day. Our lives should invite a question about, not a demand that someone else change, but it should be such not a window for people to see us, but a mirror for them to see themselves and to say, why don't I have that effect? Or why don't I have that peace? Or why don't I have that clarity? Or why don't I have that focus? Or why don't I have that resiliency? And then if you ask me, I'll say, here's where I get it from. Yeah. And that's the whole other side of people just trying to throw their faith down the throats. Like, nobody on my team is a practicing Christian. Not one of my employees. Yeah. Right. But like, when I came out 2 years ago and I was like, hey, y'all, for me, this is a ministry. Yeah. They were like, whoa, bro, whoa. Ministry. Like, it triggers all these ideas in people's minds. And I say, no, experience me, then tell me what you think about this Christian. Experience the invitation, experience the grace, experience the rigor, experience the strength, experience the protection, like, experience the provision. And then tell me if the traumas you've had through church hurt are the experience you're having with a person who feels that they're Christ-led. Right? Like, that's the difference. And I try to live that every day with my team. I try to live that with every single client. When I feel despondent, I always ask myself, there's no gain, no loss, only God speaking. And so, like, I remember one January 2 years ago, woke up to an email that we just lost $100,000 deal that we were mid-swing on. And I go outside, I pray, I listen to you got to lose yourself in the music. I take a lap around the house and, man, let's make some calls, right? Lock back into my star player. Like, this ain't the cross yet. Let's get to it. That's how my faith plays a role. It is my energy. It is my source of wisdom. It is my source of peace. It is my source of invitation. And it is how I define my responsibilities and what I should be receiving from others.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. That's you've had an impact and influence on me in so many different ways, that maybe being the biggest one. Yeah. So I so appreciate you for that. Are you ready for a quick lightning round?
Okay. I think
couple quick questions, Xavier. Can you answer some quick questions?
I absolutely cannot.
All right. You have to name an artist or a song that best represents your leadership style. What would it be? And I know you're a music guy, so that could be a tough one.
I mean, right now I'm thinking of Lose Yourself.
Okay, I like that.
I'm thinking of Lose Yourself, man. And Andre 3000 song line. He says, spaceships don't come equipped with rear view mirrors. They dip. Right? Like, can't be looking behind you, bro. Keep moving.
Love that.
Keep moving.
Love that. What are you reading, watching, or listening to that you're just really geeking out about today?
Oh man, my team just so we do book club at Justice Informed, where we're always trying to expand our own, like we're seen in the marketplace as like social impact experts and leaders, but we have to continually refine ourselves, stay up to date, learn these sorts of things. And right now we're reading Inventing Latinos. It's a book about Latinidad, about the mestizaje. I'm still learning all of these terms. It's about the chapter we just finished was called The Elusive Quest for Whiteness. We're reading about what colorism is and color blindness is across Latin America, and how the colonial practices of Europe often influenced and created that, the extermination of indigenous tribes from both Mexico and the rest of Central America and South America, like how that has influenced what we're seeing today, right? When you talk about like, you know, the Republican Cubans in Florida, or you're talking, you know, just today I saw 41% of Hispanic voters in an Ipsos poll said that they agree with President Trump's values on the wall, right? Like it's hard for me as an African American to understand that, and so reading this book has been like this incredible wake up call for a lot of our team, even to create a better space for our team, because we got 2 people on our team who they have one Latinx parent and one parent who's not, and so they're 2 biracial staff members, and what they're able to talk to me about has been just such a way for me to better understand my team, better understand and how to support them, but also understand some of the things that I know from a sociological perspective about what I'm seeing about like why certain Latinos check a certain racial box of other on the census. When we're talking about government resource allocations, like I never understood that. And stepping back, I like seeing what's happening in Dominican Republic and Haiti, and like not knowing the history of that region, right? Like having some color to it, as a lot of my Black friends continually say, man, I'm trying to go down to the DR and sit on the beach. And I'm like, hey, do you understand what this country is looking at when you talk about Black skin? Right? Like it's educated. So I'm just geeking out on this.
That's great. I love that. I love that you're doing that with your team. Favorite pastime or tradition?
Besides eating,
eating.
eating wonderful pastries and macaronis and cheeses. I would say biking with incredible music, or like what I was doing last night, lighting up a bonfire in my backyard and having a glass of scotch and just listening to the wind and the trees, looking at the trees budding. I'm an outdoor boy, so you know, put me on a hiking trail, give me a bicycle, throw me in the woods, give me some pavement, put me in a river. I'll get a fishing pole, and I'm ready. I'm checked out.
You're like a divvy aficionado here in Chicago.
Oh, I'm trying to make sure the divvy has all the support they need.
Anytime I see you, you're on a divvy.
There's a divvy bike parked right outside this office that I rode in on. It's the only one there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Xavier, thank you so much for your time and your insight and your wisdom today. I'd say, you know, today's all about, you know, leadership and leadership qualities for the next generation. One of the things that I have learned from your leadership style is that as leaders, you know, it's one thing for us to truly own and stand in our truth. It's another to very effectively help people see the different dimensions of it. And I think that's something that you've done wonderfully with your team, and as well, people like myself who are in different circles, not just from a business perspective, but from a life and brotherhood perspective. So thank you for the clarity of perspective today and always.
Well, thank you. My final point is even in what you said, that fear that people are experiencing, why they don't take on leadership, why they don't make the jump, why they don't take on risk. It's often because you're giving too much power to something else. And when you give power to something else, in any equation, there's cost and value. You are saying that the cost is yours to pay and the value is theirs to keep. And so you don't move. And just consider, how do I get the value while also paying the cost? And as James Brown said, that means you just paid the cost to be the boss.
Love that. How can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn if you just Google Xavier Ramey. If you go to YouTube and Google Xavier Ramey Chicago, if you go online to justiceinformed.com, you can find us there. And if you're looking for speaking opportunities to book Xavier Ramey, just go to xavierramey.com, and my wonderful executive assistant, Nishina, will follow up with you.
Love that. Thank you for your time, Xavier. And we want to thank everybody for joining this episode 180 of the Navigating Now Virtual Roundtable Series. We are here every week, Thursday at 3:00 Central. We go live. You can find us on LinkedIn, also at thoughteum.com/live. We will see you all next week. Thank you all.